Hey everybody, welcome back to Geezerology. It's just Dan up in Missouri and Bill up in Connecticut and myself here in Florida, and we're just sitting around shooting the breeze. There's a couple things that have happened in the world of music since the last time we convened, and I just wanted to bring them up there and see if any of my buddies or myself might have anything interesting to say about the stuff. First of all, a couple weeks ago, we lost the last surviving member of the original lineup of Lynyrd Skynyrd. Gary Rossington, the guitar player, died a couple weeks ago. He was in his 70s, and he was the last one after about half the band died in a plane crash about 50 years ago. And Rossington and a couple others kept the band going, but I think Rossington was the last one left.
I mean, I was never the world's largest Lynyrd Skynyrd fan, but I liked the.
I wasn't either, but yeah.
But I did like I forget the name of the album. The one that "Give Me Back My Bullets," I think, is one of the songs on it. "Give Me Three Steps" and all of that stuff. I mean, I like them in small doses, and as a matter of fact, I mean, it's the world's largest cliche. I feel compelled to, like, at the end of every one of our videos, we should probably go, Free Bird. But they're legendary for that. And there is a great YouTube video of them doing this. I think it's out in Oakland in about 76 or 7. And it's fantastic. I made my wife watch it, and even she was going,
was that the original band before the plane crash?
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, Lynyrd Skynyrd, I liked him. I mean, I never paid much attention to them. Certainly, as a creative force, they were pretty much done, at the level that they had been at after the plane crash. And I actually do remember that reading about the plane crash in Rolling Stone. I was in high school, and I thought it was unfortunate. And I remember
unfortunate.
the latter. The cover of their album is the one that's it's flaming with the flames in the background. That had just come out, it must have come out just before the plane crash. So
it's still a working band. I know that, but 1977 is when the plane crash happened. We lost Ronnie Van Zant, Alan Collins, but yeah, I don't know. I was never a big fan, and of course they had a big, with a couple of their albums back in the day, and a song "Free Bird" and a couple others. They had that famous back and forth with Neil Young on Southern Man, and then the Lynyrd Skynyrd answer to that, which it turns out we found out years later that they weren't really. It wasn't really a feud like everybody was making it out to be. They were just kind of playing with each other. But man, yeah, they were huge. They were huge. I hear their songs on the radio all the time back in those days, but I never pursued any of their music. I wasn't a big fan of the Southern rock.
Yeah, myself, it was, I collected a couple. That huge when Southern rock got to be, front and center, led by the Allman Brothers. And then Lynyrd Skynyrd was, I would say, number 2 in terms of popularity and reach. I never had any of their records. A couple of their songs, and of course, Free Bird, unfortunately, it's in that same category now as Stairway to Heaven. A lot of the FM stations overplayed it, and it was, one of the things back in the 70s. Well, you got to learn the chords to Free Bird and all this, and that extended outro solo, which was Gary Rossington, and he apparently co-wrote a lot of their big hits, "Give Me Three Steps" and "Sweet Home Alabama."
The plane crash happened in 1977, and the band disbanded. It was 10 years later, and 9 years later, in 1986, when Rossington actually put the band back together with Ronnie Van Zant's brother, Johnny Van Zant, who wasn't in the original group. So actually, and a guy named Artemis Pyle returned from the original band. A guy named Leon Wilkerson. But apparently Rossington is the guy who put them back together in the late 80s for a couple of years, and then put them back together in the early 90s. And they've been a going concern since the early 90s. But yeah, I haven't heard anything from them since the plane crash. So I have no idea if they were still any good or not.
Bill.
Oh, you actually have a T-shirt, Leonard Cohen.
I thought it was the perfect opportunity. I didn't know how else I was going to get that out there.
Well, that's you've got two musical artists covered there.
I have a couple. I have a handful of these T-shirts. I have a bad habit of acquiring shirts that I think I'm going to wear, but I never wear.
And we said goodbye to another long time 1970s era musician, drummer Jim Gordon. Did you catch that one?
Lightning Jim?
Yes.
Lightning Jim Gordon, who was
I did not know that.
Yeah, he was with he played in Derek and the Dominoes. He was a big session musician back in the 70s.
Yeah.
I knew him, I crossed paths with him because he was on Mad Dogs and Englishmen. That's how I knew him most. But yeah, I'm looking. He played with the Carpenters, the Byrds, Jack Bruce, Delaney and Bonnie, Derek and the Dominoes, Neil Diamond, Dr. John, Art Garfunkel, Merle Haggard, Hall & Oates, John Lennon, Randy Newman. The list goes on and on and on. Yeah, Jim had a really dark life. And remember, he was back in the 80s. He had some sort of bad mental illness, and he killed his mother. And
that's right.
Yeah.
And he spent the last. He died a couple of 3 days ago, I believe, and he spent the last 30 or 40 years of his life incarcerated in a mental hospital. Yeah. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia. While on tour with Joe Cocker in the early 1970s, Gordon reportedly punched his girlfriend, Rita Coolidge, in a hotel hallway. And that was the first sign that something was amiss. And he killed his mother in 1983 with a hammer, and then he hit her with a hammer and then fatally stabbed her with a knife. He claimed that a voice told him to kill her. Hey.
Yeah, I knew that he was just like the most in-demand session drummer, and especially with a lot of the British musicians. And I knew he played on Lennon's the Plastic Ono album, and I for some
That's
reason
right.
I thought he played on one of George Harrison's solo albums, but I probably mistaken about
He
that.
played on All Things Must Pass.
Okay.
He also played on Living in the Material World and Extra Texture.
Okay, there
He was around. He was busy, man. He was busy.
Yeah. I mean, I do remember seeing him everywhere. Yeah, his it's like it wasn't a 70s album, especially in the mid to late 70s, that he wasn't on it.
Jim Gordon, he was obviously, he had the chops, and he must have been a pretty, at the time, a pretty likable personality, because I don't think you can go from Joe Cocker, the Carpenters, such a range of musicians, but I don't know.
Well, that's what I always think. Like, he has so many credits here. I mean, it's unbelievable. Just how many credits he has here of some classic things from back in that day. But to me, not I mean, if you get that much work from that many different people, it seems to me that not only do you have to be good, but you have to be somebody who's professional and dependable and easy to work with and everything like that. Yeah, unfortunately, he had an illness that they didn't diagnose it in time. Yeah, Yes just issued a new single. Steve Howe is still trying to make that thing work. They just issued a new single and said there's a new album coming out, and they're getting ready and they're getting ready to go on a tour of the 50th anniversary of the Relayer album, which has been postponed a few times since the pandemic hit, and now they're going to go ahead and try to do it again. But now I just read yesterday or the day before that that tour has been canceled because they couldn't procure insurance against COVID shutdowns or acts of war.
I tell you, I don't know what label that the Steve Howe led version of Yes is, but man, their attorney's got to be busy. And then, how do they sort out all the copyright problems, and of course they're going to play stuff from, the more iconic albums, and, does John Anderson get a royalty cut, from when they do Roundabout or any of that stuff?
I would think, because Anderson wrote most of that material from the early 70s, which is most of the material that they play on tour.
Yeah, and that's what most of the general public are familiar with, and even their diehard. Well, I don't know that they've picked up a lot of younger fans, since say post like 1990. I would be surprised if they picked up very many younger fans. I think the fans that they have is from that 70s, 80s time period that. They're willing to go along with it, but I don't know. I'm sure Steve Howe is not doing it for monetary reasons. I'm sure he's.
Well, I think Steve Howe's doing it because it's
he's going to keep on doing it until he gets it right.
Yeah. That's why I think he's doing it because I mean, just listen. I listened to that single that was just released, and it's just. They're just trying to recapture the glory of when they were good, That's all it is. And we've talked about this before. I don't remember if we talked about it on camera or not, but it just seems to me that if Steve Howe wants to do something artistic, and making and that's what he's really there for, for artistic expression. He'd be doing something else besides this. I mean, he's just recycling. He's just recycling all that 50-year-old material over and over and over again. And that's what he's doing when he records, and then when they go out on tour, 90% of their concert tour is an old, John Anderson era material from the 70s. And like I say, they just finished touring, playing the full album Close to the Edge. Right. They got done with that tour, and the tour that they were getting ready to go out on was to play the full album of Relayer, which is all that 1970s stuff, so they're not. He's not the new material. He doesn't have the confidence, or it isn't good enough that they're going out and playing it in concert. They're just doing that to sell some records and sell some publishing rights, I guess.
I mean, the only thing you can imagine is that, like any band, especially where the creative stuff is coming from a limited number of people or maybe a person. I mean, how many original ideas? I haven't had an original idea myself like in 10 years. So I cannot imagine. I can't imagine that if you had made me come up with stuff that had to be performed, that I could do anything worthwhile. So, I think in these cases, these guys are capable, and they have proven it to a point. And then the creativity, the well runs dry, and you become like a self-plagiarist, or kind of a forced creator where you're pulling anything you can and, seeing if something works. But for the most part, the idea, I think that, if you can survive and you feel like you're doing something worthwhile, performing live, doing these kinds of tours where people are still showing up, and you can, live a decent life, and you and your crew are all being paid to do it, and it seems to work, then you should do it. I have no interest in seeing, the Rolling Stones do their, song and dance. I don't really care, but there are people who do care, and until people stop caring, then people like the Stones will continue to tour. Springsteen's out there, at least. He has a modicum of, put some material out, and some of it's uneven, some of it's okay. But people are still going to the show, and nobody really wants to hear the stuff of the last 10 years. They want to hear the same stuff that they grew up with and they heard a million times. And I don't know, do you want to say, so I saw the guy when I was 18 and he was 30 something. What is the point of seeing, except to say, hey, look, he's still upright and he can still deliver a show, but who cares? But if you haven't seen it, then maybe you do want to put it on the checklist.
Well, I thought the point you're making, and I should clarify that where I'm coming from here too. The same point is that just because I'm sitting here saying that I have no interest in it, I'm not sitting here saying he shouldn't be doing it. I'm just
right.
I'm just basically saying that I have no interest in this stuff. Yeah, good. Good for Steve Howe. Good for Steve Howe. If he can still crank out an album that has the Yes moniker on it, and he found a guy who sounds almost exactly like John Anderson, only not as good, but people are buying it. Fine, go for it. Just just don't bother knocking on my door with it, because I'm going to turn you away, right?
Yeah.
Far be it for me to say that Mick Jagger and Keith Richards shouldn't keep going out and playing the 70-year-old material on stage night after night. That's good for them. Good for them if they can make money doing it. Good for them. We all got to make a living. but from an artistic perspective, that's where I criticize it. There's nothing worth me pursuing. It says nothing to me. But I'm an old guy. I've heard it all.
but Steve Howe, he is so good at guitar. You would have to rank him, and I don't know, I hate to rank of musicians, but in top 5, top 10 of the last 30, 40 years, he could come out and do a solo album just of acoustic and classical stuff. But he knows that nobody's going to buy. He recorded the clap on the Yes album, and that was a nice little.
You would pay if Steve Howe heard you say that, he would push back. He would get, it's not the clap, it's clap.
Okay, yeah.
He's always been upset by that because people call it the clap, which is the clap. He said, no, it's clap. The name of the song is clap. And what happened was the album that appeared on Atlantic Records, whoever did the cover of it, they mislabeled it and they called it the clap on the cover of the Yes album, and he's been arguing against that ever since that happened.
But also on the intro to that, didn't John Anderson say, and this is called the clap? Or I
think you're right. I think that's probably where it started. That's probably where the record company, where the record label pulled that title. Yeah, I think you may be right on that.
But yeah,
he said he wasn't talking about the clap. He was talking about applause.
Yeah.
Oh my God! And he's carried that cross for 50 years now, right?
yeah, to me, without John Anderson, then you could put in Chris Squire. It's not really yes.
Well, yeah, yes, yes was still yes until Chris Squire died. And when Chris Squire died,
Yeah.
that was, you know, that was the whole foundation of their sound went away. Yeah. Speaking of old guys touring, did you see what Robert Smith did this week? He took on Ticketmaster because the Cure were allowed to set their ticket prices for they have an American tour coming up. And the Cure, I don't know if the Cure is the only one, but the way this happened, the Cure was allowed to set their ticket prices, and they decided to set the ticket prices low. They wanted to keep them low, you know. What Ticketmaster did was they jacked up all the fees and everything, to where people said, "Oh, okay, well, Robert Smith says that you know, the face value of the ticket is $40. Well, people are still paying $85, $90 for a ticket, you know, because of all the fees that Ticketmaster is putting on there." And Robert Smith went after him, put the pressure on him. I don't know exactly what he said or exactly how he applied the pressure, but he did. And now Ticketmaster has now lowered all their fees drastically, and they're going to issue refunds to everybody who's already bought tickets.
Good for him. That's
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was great. Yeah, with all this stuff going on, it's like, you know, just
the same person who can explain Bitcoin like coins and the whole process to me in a way that makes sense to me is the same person who's going to explain to me how ticket pricing works, because and there's a lot of information and misinformation that's put out there by people who have a stake in all of it. And it's, you know, the Ticketmaster is saying, well, it's the artists who do it. You know, we have a set service fee that we have to charge. And then sometimes we're collecting for the venues or the promoters. The promoters have, you know, everybody wants to put it on the entertainers' backs. And is it their issue? Do they set the pricing? You know, when Taylor Swift releases all tickets on the same day for the entire tour, is that something that is an anticipated problem, or is it something that was a surprise? Or what is who understands this? You know, people paying hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars, to see people who, and I don't want to argue about whether they're worth seeing. The question is, who has this money and how is it being established? And do those dollar figures actually represent what the tickets sell for? Are people buying tickets to scalp tickets intentionally, you know, at higher levels within an auditorium? Is it because the artist is holding the tickets back, or the promoter, to create a false level of availability? I don't understand it. And for the life of me, the only thing I care to see these days, and part of it is just, you know, irritation about the whole process, but I would rather go buy a ticket and go to a show in a club, you know, or a bar setting, you know, we're talking a couple of hundred people, than to go through this process of hundreds of dollars to be, you know, somewhere where you can't really experience anything meaningful. And and being in those places has been a nightmare or a suboptimal for 50 years. It's just, you know, at least it cost $12 in, you know, the era when we were growing up, or $25. So you know, if somebody was selling a ticket for $50, that is outrageous. The face value. Yeah, I saw Led Zeppelin for $7.99, but you know, the economics are I can't figure out the economics. And that's all when Ticketmaster became involved. I mean, back in my
heyday was you just bought the tickets for face value from the venue, you know, whatever the venue was, and then Ticketmaster came along, and now it's Live Nation, which now owns Ticketmaster, but Ticketmaster came along and they started adding fees to it. And then as you know, as time went on, you know, the fees started getting higher. They started figuring out different classes of fees that they could add. And then it became a thing where, and this is how I understand it, and then it became a thing where, you know, where scalpers, I call them scalpers. They don't call them scalpers now. They call them resellers. But resellers are going in and you know, this is what happened with the this is, let me go back. Resellers were coming in and buying up a bunch of tickets and then reselling them for a premium because because they were the only one who had access to these tickets because they bought them up, and now they're reselling them at a premium, and that just got out of hand. And now the way I understand it, I don't know all the ins and outs of it either, with this Taylor Swift debacle and that they decided to try to combat that by somehow by putting everything on sale all at once, but you bought somehow the real fan, the real fans, not the ticket man, but they got PIN numbers that they were going to be able to use. I don't know how they acquired them, how they distributed them, everything like that. But they got PIN numbers, so they were going to be able to get in and for a certain amount of time before the reseller market was allowed access to these tickets. Well, what happened is that so they tried that, but there was such a rush of people trying to do this all at the same time that it overwhelmed the system, and the system crashed. And so that plan went awry. Now the way I understand it, what happened with the Cure, and I don't know if this is by the specific contract with the Cure and Ticketmaster, or if this is the way it always works. I don't know. But the way I understood it with the Cure was that the Cure had the right to set the real value of the tickets. You know, and they intentionally kept them low. But they didn't have the right to dictate to Ticketmaster, you know, what they could then do with it to make their money. So now, and apparently, so the face value of the ticket, part of how this starts at the bottom of the tree is that Ticketmaster does get a certain percentage of the face value of the tickets that they sell before they start adding their other fees. Well, so what Ticketmaster did, because the Cure kept the prices so low that it was going to cut into their
Mm-hmm.
you know, into their commission on the tickets, so they decided to raise the fees that they were totally in control of to compensate for the money that they were going to not make because the percentage because of the percentage that they were the commission they were going to get from the face value of the ticket was being cut into, and not by contract, but somehow Robert Smith applied pressure to them and worked on it and really went after them hard to where they backed off on that and then decided to make it right. Now, you know, and it's, you know, but that's what it is. It used to be you just buy them straight from the venue. But now Ticketmaster's in, and now there's this reseller market and everything like that. Now you're getting so many hands in the pie. That's all, you know, that everybody's got to get their piece.
Well, hopefully, maybe other artists like Robert Smith, maybe they'll take note of that, and you know, you don't want to alienate your loyal fans, you know, but yeah, there's too many. You can only slice the pie so many ways, but you know, you would think the artist, the performer would have, you know, veto power and all this stuff, but I know there's entanglements and then, you know, different venues around the country, but yeah,
this all started, I mean, I first started noticing that Ticketmaster was was gone too far and they were getting into some trouble was it started with a Springsteen tour, right? Because what was going on there was that they had this dynamic price. I think this was the resellers were doing this. There was this dynamic price model where they were basically like selling like shares of stock, whatever the market would bear that day, and the whole supply and demand thing. When all of a sudden there was a bunch of demand and the supply was low, then the resellers would raise the price of the ticket. And there was some sort of formula they were using, to where a $75 face value ticket all of a sudden would become $7,000 because of the way the market was going, and that's when this trouble first started, and then followed up with that Taylor Swift debacle. And I'm sure that on the heels of that helped Robert Smith's case with him, going, come on guys,
It's interesting. So I'm reading. This is because that whole Springsteen thing. Again, it's something I don't really care. But he's always used as that kind of lightning rod for any kind of behavior that people perceive to be not working class or something. Purportedly, he's supposed to represent something. I don't know what that representational thing is, but if he strays too far in one direction or another, people get upset. I mean, I think he's entitled to do whatever he feels like he wants to do. So this issue was about, people being outraged about the price of the tickets. So I see here, it says in Rolling Stone, Springsteen's manager, John Landau, echoed the statement in a statement to the New York Times last week. So this is back in August of last year when this first came to the fore. Right. Landau says, in pricing tickets for this tour, we look carefully at what our peers have been doing. We chose prices that are lower than some and on par with others, regardless of the commentary about a modest number of tickets costing $1,000 or more. And this is because of the dynamic pricing. Our true average ticket price has been in the mid $200 range. So, I mean, $200, mid $200 is not, I don't know what that is. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So people are paying that. And then that's where you've got issues where, the brokers or whoever the middleman, and even if it's, individual people themselves trying to do it on StubHub or something like this, it's a very fluid situation. And I assume if you wait till the last minute, you may be able to get a ticket at at face value or even lower, perhaps.
Well, we'll see. Now all of a sudden, we know how far this goes somewhere, which is nowhere. But all of a sudden they're being dragged in front of the United States Senate to explain what's going on there. So maybe something will come out of that. I just feel that this is a classic case of a monopoly happening that needs to be broken up, just like Ma Bell was back in the 90s or whenever that happened. Because it's crazy. It's crazy. Hear what Peter Gabriel's up to?
I hope he's putting out. Is it a full moon?
Well,
this month?
yeah. He's still doing his monthly his full moon releases, but he weighed in. Gabriel's an old tech geek from way back, right? Well, he's now weighing in on this AI stuff that's going around. And Gabriel started putting forth the idea that maybe it's time to start doing some biofeedback powered music shows. What this means is somehow, and I don't understand the technology, but apparently what he's suggesting is that we could somehow get the musicians on stage wired up, and somehow this AI technology could read the musician's mood, their thought processes and everything like that, and actually generate like the light shows and and things on screen, video screens and everything like that, according to what the musicians are feeling inside, right?
Well, that could create a dichotomy, though, right? I mean, you would end up. What if you were actually very much under control yourself as you were playing, and yet the music you were playing was tempestuous, or the other way around? It would be very disorienting for the audience, right? Because you're sitting there like, I don't want to be bombarded with your feelings. I want the song that I know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the musician could be in a bad mood, but as a professional, he can still perform a ballad he's performed 5,000 times. But it's like in his mind, oh God, I got to play this song again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I really don't I really don't understand the ins and outs of this technology, so I don't really. I haven't been able to connect all the dots to see how this makes sense, but I just thought it was funny. I have this article in front of me from Classic Rock and Culture, ultimateclassicrock.com. Asked if he believed algorithms could replace human artists, Gabriel said, most people would argue no, but I would say they just need better algorithms. He says we might as well just grab the algorithms and dance with them rather than fight with them. He says he doesn't think his job or anybody else's job is safe from AI. But he says there is this idea that, excuse me, I keep getting these pop-up ads, it blocks me. He says that there is this idea that when an intelligent species is so smart that it can destroy itself, it very often does. I hope we don't fall into that trap, but we can have a wonderful party on the way to jumping over the cliff.
Oh my gosh, gee.
So, I mean, technology is great, but the creator should have the last word.
Oh my goodness gracious.
By his own demise there. Okay. Something that you probably heard about, it was just the other day, and it has to do with the group Metallica. And they bought the majority interest in a vinyl pressing company called Furnace Record Pressing in Virginia. And they have already been, producing Metallica records since for quite a while, and apparently they've pressed 5 million since 2014 of Metallica records, including they produced 900,000 last year, according to this article by this tech thing here. And so they said that the vinyl sales have outstripped CD sales for the first time since 1987, and so. What's his name? Lars Ulrich, the band's, I guess, co-founder and drummer, said they couldn't be happier for doing this, so they can, produce more vinyl, and ostensibly they would, offer, I guess, services to, maybe other up and coming groups.
Yeah, wasn't that the thing? Somebody, I think Bill said one time that a lot of the newer, younger bands aren't releasing vinyl records, but that's just simply because it's so expensive to do it, because there's such a limited capacity to do that, right? And
right.
So,
yeah. I mean, I think what I had read, it was quite illuminating a while ago, which is that no one is surprised when they see that a vinyl album is going to sell for $19 to $39 today. People just assume that's the cost, but in many of these cases, right, the sunk costs have long since been paid for, especially if these are legacy albums. The problem is the the record companies, the big companies anyway, had taken this method that they always do, which is to keep the price high, because they'll just extract all of the money that, the margin is relatively small. And instead of, taking the long view, which is what if we invest in production facilities, the kind of, factories that Metallica just bought, and build out the capability to produce more records and then lower the price, and you can still have a high quality vinyl, or you could have, a multiple of levels of quality, some audiophiles like the thicker, whatever the albums are, but you could sell them back again for $9.99 or $6.99, or whatever the case would be, certainly less than $20. As long as it wasn't like a double album with special stuff. But that's not the approach they took. So there's always been this scarcity of production capability, and then to get in line, you have to pony up, and so the record companies will pay to get their stuff produced. But in many cases, they don't own their own pressing facilities either. They've outsourced all that stuff.
Right. Well, is that a question of the outlook, like when you say that, when you argue that they could take the long view and sell them for less and everything like that, but is there a question of is this actually a long-term
I think
thing, or is it just a temporary fad that we just need to take advantage of while it's here before it goes away?
So actually, I think their view was the second, that it's a fad. I think the longer term view is that physical ownership of these things, whatever they might be, CDs or cassettes. We've talked about the fact that some bands put out cassettes, even though hardly anyone has the machinery to play one. But it's a tangible object. So I think that there's a clear value in producing vinyl, and it seems like it's of more interest in many cases to people than the CDs that the record companies would have assumed would have been the key thing, and then they could use the vinyl as their big margin maker. As I said, I mean, if the Rolling Stones produced this record, Sticky Fingers in 1971, what does it cost them to produce it as a piece of vinyl, incorporating all of the the costs, inflationary costs over 40 years? I understand that, but it still shouldn't be $39 if you were producing enough of them. And maybe that's a bad example because the zippers got to add some cost. I mean, that ain't one of those things you do all the time, right? So
That's right.
I've kind of lost track here. Didn't we hear a few months ago that all of a sudden the sales of vinyl was, took a pretty good dip, but now all of a sudden we heard this report that decided, we heard this a week or two ago, that for the first time ever that the sale of vinyls.
What I think it probably is something like that.
Of CDs.
It can both be true, right? So
I guess so.
The angle of the growth rate may be leveling off. I mean, there's got to be a limited number of people who are, going to be big buyers of vinyl stuff, especially when the albums cost so much. But I think there are more people now who would say, if I am going to invest in the physical item, I would rather have it be vinyl, and I'd rather have fewer of them. But I'm going to invest in a stereo setup, and I'm going to play them. And I mean, I play my albums too. And I had a long time ago in the 80s sold all of my albums, and I had like 1,000 records, and I got rid of them. I invested in CDs, and then I took the CDs in the early 2000s, and I burned them to hard drives, and then I got rid of the CDs. And now I have CDs until about maybe 10 years ago, when I decided, to invest in a turntable that cost only a couple $100, but a high quality turntable independently made in Massachusetts. And then I bought, a good setup with speakers and a little preamp. And now I have probably 200 albums. Now, some of them are brand new, but I limited my own investment into either things that I actually had before when I was buying records, or that I would have had if I, had the money or the
Yeah,
inclination
yeah,
at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so now that's what I've got. And some of them are used. I mean, I prefer to buy used if I can, but the idea of playing the record, it's like smoking a cigar. It's a process. You can't
Yeah.
just, slide the thing in this disc player, which I don't do anymore, or just stream something, push a button. Now I have to sit, I got to get up, I got to turn it over, and I clean the record, and I clean the needle, and it's an experience, but I enjoy it. And I couldn't tell you the difference if I mean, because I'm not one of these people who cares necessarily about the quality of the audio versus what I'm listening to. But I think if you were buying something, even if you were a younger person, you might buy vinyl. And I can see that being a kind of a consistent thing, just because of its the tangible nature of it, plus the nostalgia factor, plus the fact that you can kind of be assured now that vinyl has come back, that it is going to be kind of a persistent item that you can spend money on.
Now you got the right to sing the old man blues. They're trading your Playboy for some hush puppy shoes. One more time.